Hey there, Thomas from Bricks here. In today's video, I want to show you what is new in Bricks 1.5, a release that has really a little bit of everything. We've got some great new features, many improvements, and also quite a lot of bug fixes in this one, totaling up to a little bit more than 150 changes. So because of the size of this release, I would definitely recommend you check out the changelog yourself as well by visiting bricks.io/changelog, and you can scroll down here past the highlights and you can find the full changelog, every single new feature, and you can see the list here is quite long. All of the improvements we added in 1.5, and then also all of the bug fixes. You can click on any of those changelog entries. It's going to bring up more information, maybe a link to the bug report in the forum, or a link to the Academy, like in this case, because it's a bigger feature. So definitely check out the changelog as well, because there's obviously much more in it than what I can cover here in this short release video. All right, the focus here in 1.5 was really to offer and provide you with a more powerful and streamlined workflow and also the builder interface, and I think we did a great job here. Lots of stuff has changed, bigger stuff, smaller features that I think also need some highlighting here in this video. So I'm really excited to show you some of those as well. And yeah, let's just get started with just right at the top here, with the layout elements. So prior to Bricks 1.5, there was only the container that allowed you to lay out and group your content. Now we got 4 elements to choose from. So you can use the section, container, block, and div. I'm probably just gonna jump right to the Academy. Definitely, I also mentioned this here, that's a must read. I would also say understanding the layout. The article has been updated for 1.5. And here you can also see an illustration on how everything is supposed to be constructed, or at least the recommended way. In the end, you can tweak it to your own workflow, still going to work using the container, being able to stretch it to create a section. But I'm going to show you why it's the faster and more streamlined and also actually more powerful way to trying to stick to this kind of layout approach here. So in terms of the section, that's going to be the outermost building block of your page, and it's going to help you to structure and divide your page into basically self-containing areas. So if you have a header section, a hero section, that's already in the name, that's going to be its own section. If you have an area on your page that's responsible for the contact us, maybe it has a form, that's going to live in its own section. If you have an area on your page that's about your team members, it's going to live in its own section. So if you, for example, already have maybe a design, maybe you have a Figma file that contains of those like 5 areas, and you know, okay, I'm gonna build 5 sections in Bricks for this, and they're gonna span the entire width of your browser, as you can see here in this little illustration. Then inside of your section, you're gonna put your container. The container has the same properties. It's using the flexbox, by default 1100 pixel wide, centered on the screen, towards the middle of the screen. And for the columns, you're going to use the block, which is also using the flexbox layout model. So it makes it really easy to change the direction, to change the alignment, and also the spacing of the items inside of your block. Same goes for the container and also the section. They're all using the flexbox layout model. The div, that's an unstyled div. So if you want to customize this, that's perfect because it doesn't come, and it's plain, it doesn't come with anything pre-styled. So I'm going to show you also how this behaves inside of a block, for example. If we scroll down, you can also see here, this is how you could mentally maybe group them as well. Section, container, block, they all use the flexbox model, making it really easy to direct, align, and space out your elements, or the elements inside of them. And you can scroll further down. You'll also see here what's the difference and how to use them. And then there's a further explanation here for every layout element with a link to the article itself, ways how you can convert them between each other. If you scroll further down, you can find those information as well. So yeah, lots to explore, but very easy to use in practice. So I'm going to show you this now. We jump right into the builder, and we've got an empty canvas and we're ready to go. I'm first going to show you how I would build out. Let's just maybe stick to this example here. So we're going to build this section with a container and 2 columns using the container only. So you can see a normal workflow using this old layout approach when we only had the container. So I would start by inserting my container, and I want to make this into a section. So what I would normally do, the fastest way, I mean, you could also go to Style, Layout, and then change the width to 100% or 100 VH. But normally you would just simply stretch it. If you want to separate it also semantically, because the section element is going to use the section tag, you would change the tag as well. And then I would probably rename this section or hero section, because otherwise everything used to be a container, they're all going to have the same label, making it really hard to distinguish here in our structure panel. Now, inside my section, I'm going to insert another container. So I go on this little plus icon. Now, this is also new in 1.5. You can actually choose which layout element you want to insert. I'm going to click on the container because I want to illustrate you how the layout in the container used to work. Okay, so now I got my container inside of my section, and now I would insert 2 more containers. So what I can do, the longer way would be to change this to horizontal. Go to here and then click on the container twice to insert your 2 columns. They're gonna take up an equal amount of space because the container by default has a set width of 1100 pixels. That's why they are laid out like this automatically. The little bit faster way that I'm also gonna show you, just to make the comparison fair, would be to click on the little column icon here, or layout icon. The layout is already now set to container, and then I would click on this 50/50 2-column layout. Now you can see that I got my container-based column layout here. This is just a label. It's called column now, just to make it a bit easier to distinguish, but it's still using the container underneath it. So if you hover over the icon, you can actually see that this is still using the container. Nothing changed here. And this one is a container as well. All right. So this is how I would go about creating my 2-column section using the container only. Changing the labels a lot because obviously I need to make sure I can distinguish them. I mean, they have a different indentation here, but still, normally you would go about renaming those manually. And I'm going to show you how we would go about this using the new layout elements. So I'm just going to clear this here. I'm going to remove everything. And I'm going to start by inserting my section. So you can just click on this little plus icon, would insert a section, but normally you would go here inside of the panel, elements panel, and then click on section. And you can see it inserted my section, and it also automatically inserted a container. Now this is optional. We just insert this for you because that's how you would most commonly use it. If you have a section that doesn't really require a container, like if you have a hero section that's just going to contain a heading and a button centered inside a section, you don't really need to have a container inside of it, so you can delete this as well. In our use case, we are going to keep it. We want to build our 2-column-based layout with the container centered here. So I would select my container, I would go here, and the default is actually the block element for the layout, and you can change this if you want to have the div element for some reason as the default for your columns. Then you can change this in the brick settings in the admin area. Okay, we have our block selected, and then we click on 50/50, and you can see my 2 columns have been inserted. So I don't need to rename any label. Sorry, my HTML tag is already set to section. I don't need to stretch anything. And it's also easier to distinguish because they all use a different icon as well. You can see here, if I hover over my column, there's actually a block underneath this column. So the column is going to take up all the available space that it has. Because we have 2 columns, they take up 50% each, but I don't need to set any width manually here if it's an equal width layout. If I'm gonna put in another column, let's just say I wanna clone this, then you can see they all take up now 1/3 of the space. If I have another column, they're all basically 25%. And yeah, that's how I would go about creating this layout using the section, container, and the block. Just need to click on section, click here, select my layout, and within how many clicks did I do? Section, select the container, click on this. Within 4 clicks, I've got my two-column section set up easily. Another advantage when sticking to this predefined layout structure of using the section, container, and then your block or div inside of it is that you can use the theme styles to your advantage. So I'm gonna maybe duplicate those sections here. So now I've got 3 sections on my page. And because they're all sections and I'm not using them anywhere else, I'm only using them on the root level, I can go into my theme styles and I can space them out. So if I go to the theme styles here for my section, I can say maybe I want to have a margin bottom here to separate them a little bit. It just depends what you want to use. Of course, you can use your padding as well. The padding I would probably actually use in order to create some breathing room on smaller devices. I'm going to show you. If I set this here now to 15 on the right, 15 on the left, and then I view this on a smaller screen, you can now see that I have some spacing. So on smaller screens, my text or whatever is going to be inside of my column, it's not going to stick to the edge of the screen. So that's one way to use it here. Same goes also for the container element. Maybe you want to create and add some padding or margin here as well. You can do this globally using the theme styles. Okay. What about if you already have a site created with bricks using the container element? Then you can actually convert your elements very easily, either with a single click. So we can go to the settings. So we go to brick settings, and then we've got our converter here. And if you select this option, you can actually convert your container based pages and templates or any other post type where you built with bricks into the new section and block elements. But I would definitely recommend you to create a backup before here, because it's going to change all of those containers to section and blocks. So if something doesn't work as expected or for whatever other reason, create a backup as it says here. So I can convert this, and then it's going to change all of my pages and templates into this new section and block elements. I can also do this individually, or for some reason you start building your site. Maybe you have a column somewhere, and then you decide at some point, because your layout actually changed, okay, I want to make this a div. Then what you need to do here, let me just maybe delete the second one. So now I have one column here. If you want to convert this into a div, you can just right click on your, in my case, the block here. And the context menu now also shows inside of the structure panel. That's also actually a new feature in Bricks 1.5. And then you can go down here to convert. And then you can say, okay, let me convert this to a div. And now my my block is now a div. And you can also immediately see the difference here. So now, instead of taking up all of the available space, it actually only takes up the space of the content that's inside of it. Right now it's empty, so it's just going to take up a predefined width and height. Otherwise it wouldn't be visible on the canvas. But if I put in a, let's put in a heading, you can now see that my div, maybe actually let me rename this to div so it's a little bit clearer. You can now see that my div, in terms of the weight, the width and the height, takes up the dimensions of the heading inside here. So if I now were to add a icon in here, you can now see that it increases in its height, because now we've got our heading and our icon in here. All right. Yeah, just take a little bit of time to play with the 4 elements here, but yeah, sticking with the section container and the block element, I think it's going to work very well out of the box without having to reconfigure a lot of basic settings all the time. And it gives you the additional benefits that I just showed you using the section here in combination with the theme styles or the container as well, to your advantage. All right, that's the first part. Covered, checked, layout elements. And I want to show you the nestable elements. Nestable elements is actually a really cool feature, and it's going to make your bricks elements, also custom elements, much more customizable. So we've got some pretty complex elements in bricks, I would say, that right now, in order to customize them, we've got a lot of controls on each and every one of them. I'm going to show you maybe an example here. Using the slider, or maybe I'm just gonna show you first the nestable elements that we have now in bricks, which is the accordion, tabs, and the slider element. So if I'm gonna insert my nestable slider, you will see immediately what I mean. You can see the slider has been inserted, and I can actually see each and every single slide and also all of the elements inside of it. So I can treat the single element basically how I was treating my container before. I can say, okay, I want to put in this element, I want to put in another element, and this behaves exactly like this. And the slide itself, it's just a block. This is a block. This is also a block. If you click here, you can see I've got my 3 slides. If you want to edit the second slide, you would just click on the second. It also brings you immediately to the second slide. Same goes for the third slide, and then you can just say, okay, you know what, in my third slide, or actually maybe in my first one, I want to also put in an icon, and just like that, you can customize your nestable slider now very easily, as you would normally customize anything inside of a container, for example. If we compare this to the slider we had before, which I'm just gonna call the flat slider, because all we got here is just this one element, that's the slider. I don't have access to all of this here. The way we provided the access in the normal slider, the flat slider, was just by having those repeaters here, and then you click on them, and then you can customize a few things. So you could customize the title, you can customize the content. Some users got very creative here and created a template for a slide and then insert this as the bricks template as a shortcode. So that was a great, interesting workaround. But yeah, of course, also very cumbersome and not doesn't really scale well. And then here for the button, we had also all of those settings for the button predefined under this one big repeater item. Now, if you want to customize the button here, you would just click on the button and you just customize the button of this particular slide. So that's a huge advantage now, having this nestable slider, accordion, and tabs. Another really cool thing about this, I'm going to remove this. I'm going to remove my slides. I want to show you how you can actually create a loop here. So you could just loop over your slides, maybe showcasing your latest posts in a slide by using the query loop builder. So all I need to do here is just to enable my query loop. And you can immediately see how my pagination is updating here. So now it shows me the 10 latest posts. Of course, I can change this. If I change this to 4, it's going to update and it's going to show you the last 4 posts or whatever else you want to query here. So now my heading, what I would do, I would change this. Well, you don't need to use the heading, you can use the post title as well. But if I change this to the post title and my button, I'm gonna say read more. And then I'm gonna link this to my dynamic data, where I would say I wanna link this to the post itself. Yeah. So now if I'm gonna preview this, you can actually see that I now created a loop inside of my slider here, and every post is in its own slide. If I were to click on this link, it would bring me to this post here, post number 3. So that's a really cool way. This also works for the accordion, the nested accordion, and for the tabs element, we actually need to work on the query loop. It's not supported there yet because it has a different markup, but yeah, we're also working on that as well. So that's Nestable Elements, also a really cool feature in Bricks 1.5. Okay, next up is the structure panel. Also, a lot has changed here, a lot of improvements. First of all, and the first one you actually already saw, is the ability to just right-click on any item here inside of the structure panel, and it gives you the context menu. Because we've got more options now, it definitely made sense to make this available here as well, not only on the canvas. So that was already possible before. You could just click here and you would have the context menu. But previously, prior to Bricks 1.5, we only had those little 3 dots here that you need to hover over, and then you could just delete, clone, edit, and I think there was another action I already forgot. But now you can just basically do all of this. Also copy the styles of a particular element using the context menu. Now, if you hover over any of the structure items, you will also see this little duplicate and delete action icons. By default, they are not enabled. So what you need to do, you go to your settings, and then inside of the builder, we've got the structure panel, and you can enable the duplicate and delete actions from here. So if you only want to show the delete icon, you can just enable only delete. Or if you want to only show the duplicate, or you just have leave it disabled if you want to have a cleaner interface and you prefer working with the context menu only. Now another new addition to the structure panel, and I'm probably going to insert the template here as well. Let's take this one. I'm not going to import any images. Just want to show you the structure. So let's just insert that one, which is using the container only, as you can see here. What did I want to show you? The sticky header. Okay, so you can see this as a pretty long structure here. So as I scroll down, you can see that the header sticks to the top, meaning if you just want to delete all of your elements in here, you can easily do this without having to scroll up all the way. Or if you want to collapse everything, you can just also do this. You don't have to scroll up all the way. So now this header is going to be sticky. Another time saver, and that's also, it's just one of those many improvements that we added in this release. And so definitely go to the changelog, because I'm only able to cover maybe 1/3 of all of them. Here is the ability to expand a layout element when you drag a new element over it. So let's just say I want to insert this heading here inside of my hero section, or the last set, it doesn't really matter, because now it's collapsed by default. If I go here and I hover over it, you can see how it automatically expands without me first having to go here and then basically expanding everything manually. So that's another great little improvement, I think. And there's another setting if you prefer actually working with this structure collapsed. So if we go back here, we can also enable this one here, collapse on page load. So if I would save it now, and next time I go into the builder, no matter how complex my structure is, by default, it's going to be collapsed. So again, for you, another thing, how you can customize the builder to your liking, how you prefer working, and however you are most productive. And now another cool feature in terms of the workflow when deleting elements. So let's just say I've got this element selected here, my heading. Or maybe let's take this button here. So it's the second button. If I'm going to delete this, so I delete button number 2, you can see that automatically button number 1 is selected. Previously, you deleted an element and nothing was selected. So if you want to select the other button next, you would have to click on it either on the structure panel or on the canvas, which also takes more time. Not anymore. Now we can delete button number 1. And because there are no more buttons, it goes to the parent element, which is our buttons container. So if I delete this one, you can see now it goes to my heading. And of course, I can also use the keyboard shortcut Command Control Delete to delete my heading, my subheading, my background, and my hero section. And this way, especially when you start working with bricks in more detail, more on a daily basis, definitely those keyboard shortcuts, they're gonna save you so much time. Yeah, so definitely take advantage of them. Let's see. Let's have a look at my notes here. Structure panel. Check. Went through all of those. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about the global classes, the CSS classes in Bricks. Let's clean everything up here. Let's put in a section with a container. And another time-saving feature, I would call this. If I have, just gonna put those two classes here. So now my container has two classes. One is responsible here for my background and the other one is responsible for my border. And you can now see immediately when you edit an element that it lists the active classes as well. So previously this was not available as information. You only had this active classes counter and then you need to click here and then you could see the element classes and then select them. Now you can click here. Because I've been working on the border class before, it's already selected for me. But if I want to switch to the other class, I would just click on it. And now I'm editing this class. If I click on the class that's already active, it deselects it and I can continue editing my element ID directly. Another keyboard shortcut that's also pretty cool is if you're editing an element and you would just click, hold down Command Control and press Enter, which I'm doing now. You can see that although I'm on the canvas here, I only have my element selected. It opens up the classes drop-down menu here. And then I can, because I'm already in here, I can just use the arrow up and down. So now I click on arrow down. And you can see on the left-hand side that I can navigate through my classes. Now I'm here on my border class. If I hit enter, it automatically selects my border class. So another keyboard shortcut, once you're used to them, you're just gonna fly through the interface really. So that's one also possible. Now, if for some reason you're not working with classes at all, and you would not want to have this interface, then you can actually also disable it now. Which is here in the control panel. There's one setting now. If you set this, you disable the global classes and you will not be disturbed, or no one will be confused by the interface if you're not actually working with it. So that's another customization option now in Bricks 1.5. All right, let's keep going. Let's delete everything, just easier for me to tackle the next item, which is the query loop. So now you can actually also query attachments, or we just call it media. It's probably easier to understand. And so I can create an image gallery, for example. I'm going to show you. So I got my section here, I've got my container here, and now I want to create a query loop. So I need to insert an item. So because I want to hold my content, I'm just probably going to insert, doesn't really matter. I'm going to pick a block, and you could also actually pick a div in this case, but I'm going to stick with this structure. So inside of my block, I'm going to put in an image, which is empty now. So let's just first enable our loop. So this is going to be my loop item. If you're new to the whole loop topic, that's just also a little bit of an explanation on how it works. So we set up our loop and we have now image selected. That's why it doesn't show me anything at the moment. But we are inside this query. This image is inside of my query. So what I can do now, first, I actually need to set the post type. So I'm going to change this from posts to media. So this is new. All right. So now I'm querying over the attachments, post type attachment. Then here for my image, I'm not going to select any static image. I want to have a dynamic data. And I want to use the post ID here, not the featured image or anything, because we are inside, we're already querying the attachments. You actually want to query them by their ID. So I'm going to select the ID here. And now you can see that it's outputting all of those images. So now, of course, you can just lay them out in any way you want. So if you want to have, maybe we want to have 4 images in a row. So what I would do now, I would change my block width. I'm going to just change this to 25%. And then I'm going to make sure it's next to each other. No, that was wrong. that needs to be here. Sorry. Okay. They're all 25% next to each other. They should also break, so I need to change this to wrap. Now the height looks a bit funky, so what we can actually do here, and this is also setting I think we also pretty recently added, take advantage of the object fit, so we can set this to cover, and then we can define a height here. So let's just say we want to have it 300 pixel. Okay. Of course, you can also add some spacing in between here, but I'm just want to show you, or you can change the number of items that you query. If I change this from 10 to 8, just to have the layout here in my grid, that's how it's going to look like. We can also link this to the lightbox. So when you're on the front end would have a look at this, it's going to open up the lightbox and you can go through this using your keyboard. So that's another feature that's possible now. There are probably other use cases and some features in regards to using the post type media that we will add going forward. But just for now, using this to create an image gallery, for example, it's going to be an interesting use case for sure. All right, that's the query loop. Another thing in regards to integrations, now the query loop also integrates with Metabox relationships and the Jet Engine relationships. Both are now supported in Bricks 1.5. Also, you can now nest post queries inside of term queries. Also more information on the changelog about this. I think the changelog entry also has a little example there why you would use this. All right, infinite scrolling, that's also possible now in Bricks 1.5 on the posts element or also inside of the query loop. So let me just show you this one maybe quickly. I'm gonna change this to use my posts. Post per page, we're maybe gonna show only 3 initially. Then the block, I wanna make sure this is expanding the entire width. For the height, I'm gonna just take up a lot of height here because I want to show you the lazy loading, so it's gonna be easier to showcase. Let's do 75 VH. So it's gonna basically cover 75 out of 100 units of the viewport height, so the available vertical space here. Okay, so we got our block here. Maybe should we add a little bit of a background so it's a bit easier to distinguish? Let's use the post title. Put it at the top left so you can see when it's being loaded. Maybe we add some little bit of margin here between our items, and then inside of the query settings, if we scroll down a little bit, you have the infinite scroll option here. Now, in terms of animations or adding some sort of spinner here for the lazy loading, that's also definitely something that we need to add in a future release, but that's just basically now the first level of this integration here, of this feature for infinite scroll. So let me just save it. Okay, so now we've got 2. No, how many do I show? What did I say? 3, right? Okay, so it's gonna show the first 3. Let's go to the front end. And you can see it is probably the easiest way to have a look at this is just by looking at the scroll bar. So now you can see my scroll bar. As I scroll down, you will see that the new posts are being loaded. Now as the scroll bar gets smaller, you can see now I have more room to scroll down. More items are loaded. More items are loaded until everything is loaded. More items are loaded. And now all of my posts, I marked this one called oldest. So now all of my posts have been lazy loaded as I scroll down through the page. All right. That's the infinite scrolling feature in Bricks 1.5. There are a few new additions and improvements to the color palette. Also central part of the builder, of course, colors. Let me clean this up. I'm going to show you this on a block. All right, let's just go to the background color. And the first thing I want to show you in relation to the color palette is the ability to reorder the colors inside the palette just by via drag and drop. If you want to maintain a consistent color scheme, and maybe if we were to add a new color here in this one, so let's just say I have this color, which I'm going to save, which is now down here, but it's actually more suitable to be up here somewhere. I would just take it, and then I can drag and drop it, and now it's positioned here. So next time you open it up, it's going to be located here rather than the end. Otherwise, you would have to maybe delete a few of your colors and then re-add your color just that it fits into the color scheme. This way now you can just use drag and drop and just reorder them really easy. You can also set a default color palette, which I think I actually already did, because this one is called default. That's the one that Bricks ships with. And then I have one called CSS Vars. But you can see that even without me selecting any color, if I just open up the color control, this one shows here. And that's because when you edit your palette, you can set it as a default palette. So this one is enabled as default. If I want to change this to this palette, which is just labeled default, it could also have any other name. And I edit it, I set it to default, I save my change. And now next time I open up my color palette, you can see that instead of the CSS var, it's now using the default color palette. Of course, if you have selected the color here that doesn't belong to the default palette, then it's gonna show whatever palette the active color is a part of course. Then also, if you select a color, let's just say I've got this one here. I can see here the value, but usually when you wanted to see the value, you have to go here and then you have to look here, or you have to hover over the color inside of the color palette. Now you can just go to the setting and you can just hover over here and it will bring up the color value. So you don't, in order to inspect it, again, an improvement that's going to save you some time. If you do this quite often, it's going to save you. The more you do it, of course, the more time it's going to save you in the future. All right, you're also now able to set raw color values. So either web font save color, if you just wanna, do I have one in here? You can see first here the new input, it's called raw. In this case here, I actually put in a CSS variable called color hex, and this CSS var needs to be available on the front end because we are basically getting the color value that's behind this variable from the canvas. So you can set this, for example, in your child theme somewhere, or in your, I think this one is coming from my settings here, custom code. Yeah, here you can see this is my color hex, and this is the value, color value behind it. I have also two more here, which I think I was also using. Yeah, there's here the color RGB, which has an RGB color value with a transparency. And this one is also using a raw value, but it's just blue. That's just a web safe font color. So that's also possible to put in. Of course, most of the time you'll probably work with CSS variables or just whatever hex or RGB or HSL value you would define for your colors. All right, that's everything in terms of the color palette. Let's have a look at the code element. I think also some nice improvements have happened here. Also in combination with users and developers reporting this on the forum. So thank you very much for everyone who participated here. That helped shape this improvement, of course. Let me insert a code element, just like that, using the keyboard. That's how you do it. And then we click on, which I could actually also do with the keyboard. We click on our code element, and then we have a code snippet by default, and we enable the code execution. So now you can see it's actually rendering my code. In this case, it's just a few styling rules and my H1 heading here. Now, previously, when code execution was enabled, in order for you to see your changes on the canvas or to save those changes, you always first needed to use this run code, which was confusing and also not really needed in all of the cases. So basically here now, I'm not having any PHP code, so I don't need to send this code to the server in order to run it. So now if you have non-PHP code, like in our case here, it's just gonna update it immediately and in real time. So if I change the color, for example, to blue, you will see that it updates immediately. I don't need to click any run code here. Now, because we have one code editor only in the code element for all the languages, and I think that's also most likely something that we are going to address in a future update by separating and providing code editors per language. So you're going to have one for CSS, you're going to have one for JavaScript, one for HTML, and one for PHP. But right now, that's currently how status quo is. So now let me just put in some PHP code. So I'm gonna start writing here my opening PHP tag, and you can see as soon as I have finished with my PHP opening tag, I can see this little blue info message on the top left saying that we have some unexecuted PHP code, and this one we have to run it manually. There are also some improvements that I'm going to show you how you can do this really quickly, but we don't want to having to execute this every time you hit the key here, because it's going to send a request to the server and it's going to execute your PHP, which also on weaker hostings can definitely lead to lags or timeouts. So that's why you need to do this manually, but it's very easy. Let me just write something here, some PHP. Let's close this off. And the fastest way to execute this, which you can also see in the notification, is just to hit Command R or Control R if you're on Windows, and that's gonna run the code. So now if I click Command R, you can see that my PHP code is executed. It also automatically executes if when you save. So now let's just say some PHP save. All right, and now I hit Command S on my Mac, and I'm gonna save it. And you can see that it updates the canvas as well. And this change is also available now on the front end, even if you move your mouse. So if I just make a change here and say mouse, and I'm just move my mouse, you can see that it also executes the code for you. So it's trying its best to basically, and you have to do the least amount possible to execute your code. And we also only need to do this for PHP code. If we only have non-PHP code in here, CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, we don't need to do any of this. So another, again, improvement and time saver, I think. It's gonna a lot of users can now enjoy. All right, let's have a look at some more keyboard shortcuts. Those are always fun to illustrate. What do we have here? Holding down Shift to directly edit a new element. Okay. So up until now, or like the default behavior when you insert a new element, so let's just say I insert this heading, is that it inserts the heading and I can continue inserting. It's keeping me here in this elements panel. It doesn't directly edit the element. So if I now want to edit my heading, I need to click here, and then I can start editing, which is fine if you want to insert multiple elements at once. But that's, of course, not always the case, and you should be able to choose how the builder behaves. So let's just say I have my heading here. Then I put in a block, and then under my block, I'm going to put in an icon. But the icon is the last element that I want to insert, and then I want to immediately start editing it without having to click on it. So now if I hold down Shift, which I'm doing now here, and I click on the icon, you can see that it inserts the icon and that automatically it brings me into the edit mode here as well. Okay, so I can start editing my icon just like that. That's one keyboard shortcut. The other one is to hold down Command Control to insert a new element after the active element. Okay, that's also pretty cool. Because right now, when you have an element selected, so let's just say I have my section and my container. I select my container, and now in order for me to create a column layout, I would just gonna put in my blocks. I'm gonna put in my 2 blocks. which is fine if I want to put them inside of my container. So I can click here to put my block inside of a container. But if I want to insert an element after my container, normally what I have to do, like if I want to show this heading after the container, I would click on it, it inserts it, and then I need to arrange via drag and drop and to just basically place it outside, which of course takes time. An unnecessary amount of time. So what I can do now, I can select my container, and now if I hold down Command or Control and I insert my heading, you can see that it's being inserted after my container and not inside of it. So that's another time saver as well. You can also see as soon as I hold down Command, this plus icon from inserting inside of my container changes to this little arrow down, indicating that it's going to insert the element after the selected element. Okay, that's also another indicator here. Same for the structure panel. If you right click, by default, you will see this insert. If I hold down Command, it also changes from insert to insert after. So this is another indication on what's going to happen once you hold down Command or Control. Again, another one of those improvements that I think I'm going to shave off some editing time for everyone. What else do we have? We can see now the active or the inherited font family and the font weight in the placeholder text. So if I'm going to have a look at my heading here, as you can see, there's no setting indicator on typography, so I haven't set anything custom here. This is just coming from my theme styles. I think in my theme styles, I've set up some defaults for the headings. Yeah, I selected a custom font here called Gotham, and then font weight is 700. That's coming from the user agent style sheet in Chrome, on my case, Brave. So if I click on this heading, now I can actually see which font this heading is using. So I go to typography, and it's going to pull the font family and the font weight from the computed styles here on the canvas. So it's recognizing, okay, this is using Gotham and the font weight is 700. So I can easily see what's being used here without having to guess. Previously, it just only showed you the label font family and font weight. Now you can see the actual inherited values. Again, improvement and time saver. And then we've got the ability now for conditional display logic. It's possible now, but only through a filter. So if you know how to write PHP, you can already take advantage of that feature. There's an Academy article as well. If we head over to the changelog, was it mentioned here? I have to look it up, but there's a link to that as well. To the function. Oh, let me quickly look it up. I want to show you that one. Here. New filter, bricks element render. Let's click on it. Let's load it. And here you can add your PHP logic. If it returns true, a Boolean true, it's gonna render the element. If it's gonna return false after whatever conditional check you put in, it's not gonna render the element. And it's really not gonna render it. It's not gonna output the PHP on the front end. It's not just gonna hide it like display none in CSS. It's really not gonna output the HTML in the first place. There's a bunch of examples down here where you can see what's going to happen. Here we're checking the element ID. We are basically looking for a specific element. And then if the user is logged in, we're going to show this. If it's going to be just a visitor to our website that's not logged in, it would not see the element with this ID. And there are a bunch of other examples down here, a little bit more complex as well. All right. The interface in terms of the conditional display logic, it's also coming to bricks. That's also already on the roadmap as well. Now, in terms of performance, there are also multiple improvements. Where am I here? Let me close some tabs. Actually, I could have left this one open. I'm not sure if I have this setting already enabled. I think in the changelog it's also mentioned. Oh yeah, here you can see this experimental setting is pretty cool. and also definitely provide some feedback if it's not working as expected. That's why it's experimental, but you can enable this to only add the element classes and the IDs as needed. So it's gonna also further reduce your markup. I'm gonna show you. If you enable this setting, if you go to performance, I know I haven't enabled it yet. This is the experimental setting I'm talking about. Let's just have a look how our front end looks right now. So I can inspect my code. Actually, this data I don't actually have anymore. Let's save it. Let's reload it. And let's inspect it. And you can see now by default, it's always adding this ID to my heading. Although, as you can see here, I'm inspecting the styles. I don't actually have anything custom set here in terms of the styling. So there isn't really any need for me here to have this ID. It's also not a custom set ID. If it would be custom set ID, it's actually going to stay because that's probably there for a reason, maybe for an anchor link, but we haven't set anything here. So actually there's no need to add this to our heading. For the container and the section, same thing, they're also blank, right? Do we add anything here? This is empty. This is empty, this is empty. Okay, so actually they don't need to have this ID. Let's enable the setting. Another actually experimental feature, now that I see it here, you are now able to cache your query loop. That's also further going to improve performance. Lazy loading now also has a setting for an offset. So before, which is basically once you hit the bottom of the screen, and then the lazy load loaded the next item. Now you can also specify a custom value here to fine tune this setting as well. All right, but now I enabled this setting here, so it shouldn't add the element ID anymore because the heading doesn't have any styles. So now if I reload here, I can now see that I no longer have an ID on my heading, on my container, and my section. Now they have some default styles. That's what we talked about in the beginning with the layout elements in terms of they have some useful defaults. So they by default flex elements and have some other settings as well. So we need the class here. Same goes for our container, but the heading doesn't have any settings, so it doesn't need to have this ID set here. Actually, even the class here for the BRXE heading would not be really necessary. That's another improvement, of course, that we're going to incorporate in the future, but we need to go through the elements one by one to see if the heading, for example, there are also some cases where it actually needs to have the class on it. If you use a separator inside of a heading, for example. And so, yeah, it's a little bit more complex than just to say, oh, let's just remove this class here. No one needs it. It's there for a reason right now. All right, that's an improvement. In terms of the file sizes also, this file was pretty big. If you use the inline styles by default, it's used to be 229 kilobyte. This now also has been reduced 58%. It's now less than 100 kilobyte. And of course, going forward with everything, as we keep on optimizing, this value is going to drop even more. Let me see, was there anything else I wanted to add? You can pin global elements. That was the last feature that I can show you quickly, which is also pretty useful if you work a lot with global elements, because right now they always sit at the bottom here. And if they are global and you want to reuse them and you actually work a lot with them, it's a little bit time consuming having to scroll through all of the elements just to get to the global element. So what you can do now, you can just hover and pin it as well. So this was also not available before 1.5. So now I can pin my global button, and you can now see my global button under the pinned elements. And it even has this little globe here separating it from non-global elements. All right, that's everything I wanted to cover in this release video. I hope you enjoyed this one. It was a lot of work, a lot of fun also with working with everyone here in the forum as well. And yeah, keep on happy building. Bye-bye.